Could lawsuits be expected by AEW talents who are fired after the post-AEW All-Out Media Scrum brawl? We have an update on the Young Bucks possibly sending feelers out to the WWE upon expiration of their contracts in a couple of years' time. Being the Elite is on hiatus after the brawl, after the media scrum at All-Out involving the Elite. Sami Guevara says he's got a lot he wants to get off his chest in his upcoming vlog, and Rampage continues to decline in the ratings. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. And let's start off about the latest development when it comes to the All Out post-media scrum brawl, because again, we spoke about this last night. We spoke about the latest developments on the third-party investigation involving the brawl that had CM Punk, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Ace Steel, all possibly fighting each other, hair being pulled, biting happening. We also know it led to suspensions for everyone involved. That includes the producers, who were also in Punk's locker room trying to break up the brawl. That includes the likes of Christopher Daniels, Pat Burke, Michael Nakazawa, Brandon Cutler. Any bystander that got involved is currently suspended by AEW. And if talent does get fired, because of course we do know that there is still a big question mark over the AEW future of two people in particular, that being the former AEW World Champion CM Punk, who is now on the shelf with a tricep injury. He recently underwent surgery, is expected to be out of action for 8 months. Ace Steel, AEW producer, longtime friend and trainer of CM Punk, is also currently suspended by All Elite Wrestling, and particularly those two, Punk and Steel, their AEW future, i.e. their employment status with the company, is set to be determined upon the outcome of this third-party investigation that is being conducted by an external entity that will be videotape interviewing everyone involved, including bystanders that saw the brawl happen, that being the likes of MJF and Chief Legal Officer of All Elite Wrestling, Mega Parek. Depending on the outcome of that investigation, CM Punk and Ace Steel could indeed be fired by the company if there's cause to do so. However, it must be stated now that if people like Punk, like Ace Steel, do get terminated from All Elite Wrestling, do get terminated from their contracts rather, we could be expecting to see lawsuits in the future. That is if reports are to be believed. Now, lawsuits can be expected if there is anyone fired due to the events that occurred after AEW All Out went off the air. According to Dave Meltzer on the latest edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, Meltzer had some very interesting comments regarding what indeed could be happening in the future if terminations do occur. Now, of course, post All Out, CM Punk launched a scathing rant on Hangman Page, Scott Colton, also known as Colt Cabana, the Elite, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks executive vice presidents, of course, all of All Elite Wrestling, sitting right next to Tony Khan at the time. Now, in the aftermath, the parties got involved into an altercation in Punk's locker room. All involved in the brawl were suspended, with many believing CM Punk and Ace Steel could be set to be handed their pink slip due to their involvement in the event. However, as I mentioned, Dave Meltzer is reporting on the latest edition of Wrestling Observer Radio that if anyone is fired, fans can expect lawsuits to begin to form. This is what Meltzer had to say, quote, "I wouldn't be surprised if someone's going to file a lawsuit coming out of this, if not multiple. That's the one thing, and I expect that's from the AEW standpoint why this is really a mess, because I do expect if anybody gets fired, there'll be lawsuits." Now, it must be said, we haven't got any confirmation as of right now as if anyone has actually or is expected to get fired. We'll have to wait and see. The thing is with Meltzer, and this is, I think, really key when covering this story, this ever-evolving story, this incident, and of course we've covered every single aspect possible of it and tried to get as many different viewpoints as possible and dissect all of the reports that have been put out there regarding what did or didn't happen after All Out a couple of weekends ago. And when Meltzer says, I expect lawsuits to come out of this, chances are one of those people on the screen, or maybe someone else you've spoken to within AEW, expects the same. And frankly, it's not a really big sort of jump to expect that to happen. Let's be honest. There's already been one report or one side of the story. If you believe the Elite, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks side of it, they're suggesting that Punk was already threatening legal action action before they left his locker room, or as soon as they walked into the locker room, he was threatening legal action. So it wouldn't come as a massive shock if CM Punk launched a lawsuit against AEW or the parties involved, if indeed he did get fired. The fact that AEW is taking their time with all of this, the fact that AEW is being very, very, very cautious about all of this, goes to show that they know this is a really delicate situation, and they could find themselves in a lot of hot water, or certain parties could find themselves in a lot of hot water if they don't do things by the book, and if they don't find out legitimately what happened, and if they do a rush to judgment here, if they do a rush to judgment and they act without knowing the entirety of what happened, if they don't know the entirety of all of the facts, they could find themselves in a lot of legal hot water, and they don't want to find themselves involved in all of that. That's why, as I've said before, when the news came out that everyone involved, including people that tried to break up the situation, had been suspended, I saw a lot of comments saying, why? And my response was, well, because they need to protect themselves from it legally. They need to ensure that nobody involved was backstage at subsequent tapings, because what if they say something, or what if they spread the message, or what if they leak out information, or, you know what I mean? It's just, it could be damaging if in the future they have to go to court to explain why they terminated a certain party. And again, they're looking right now, this third-party investigation is looking for reasons to either fire or keep certain people. If they find out that CM Punk initiated things and threw the first punch at Mac Jackson, and as soon as they peacefully came into the locker room, he started punching them, that's grounds for dismissal. If it's the other way around, if the Young Bucks came in and kicked the door down and Matt Jackson threw the first punch at CM Punk, that's grounds for dismissal. But they can't dismiss them without knowing the entire facts, because something bad could happen. Now, it's not just AEW as well that needs protecting, it must be said as well. We're talking about individual parties here. We know that Nick Jackson currently has a black eye, and that's because Ace Steel allegedly threw a chair at him. Nick Jackson may find it upon himself to press charges, or at least file a lawsuit against Ace Steel for grievous bodily harm. I don't know what the law is in America when it comes to that, but he could file charges, or he could file a lawsuit against Ace Steel. And frankly, anyone involved in all of this, even the people, again, that tried to break it up, could try to sue AEW for an unsafe work environment, because that's exactly what it feels like. That's exactly what it seems like if you've got a mass brawl involving multiple people happening that involves, hair pulling and biting and black eyes and objects being thrown. That can lead to a lawsuit, unsafe work conditions. So AEW really needs to be careful, and I do agree with what Dave Meltzer is saying here. I don't agree with a lot of what he says, honestly, especially when it pertains to this, because clearly he's coming at it from one side and not the other. But I would, if anything, I would be really, really surprised if there's not one lawsuit involved in this. Honestly, let's be honest here. If AEW manages, and when I say AEW, I mean Tony Khan, if Tony Khan manages to smooth everything over, everyone keeps their jobs, and everyone eventually gets on the same page and is able to move past their issues, and no legal action is taken, that is a ginormous win for Tony Khan, because even though we get further and further away from the incident and people talk about it less, or people forget about it, or they move on to the latest developing news story, whatever that may be. It feels like in pro wrestling there's a different one every single day. But make no mistake, this incident is a huge flashpoint for AEW, and it could be a real big problem legally for them going forward over the next year or 18 months. And potentially, when you start thinking of damages and you start thinking of how much these lawsuits could cost them in legal fees, it could be a big blow to the company. That's not to say it's going to make AEW bankrupt by any stretch of the imagination. And even the worst outcome would maybe cost them millions of dollars, but that's still a lot of money. That is still a considerable amount of money. And AEW needs to make sure that everything is in place and they have all of their bases covered when it comes to this. So I do agree with what Meltzer is saying there when he says, look, the chances are there's going to be a lawsuit, whether it's for wrongful termination, whether it's for just the brawl itself, whether it's unsafe work environment, whether it's one party, suing the other, i.e. one person involved in the brawl suing the other. That's an absolute possibility as well. Nothing is off the table at this point when it pertains to this brawl. So keep your eyes peeled, because I know we've spoken about it a lot recently, but it's a story that is ever evolving and it just won't go away. And particularly, you could argue, Punk's injured at the moment. From what we understand, he suffered the injury during the match, the main event at All Out, but he could possibly have an argument to state that, yes, he hurt himself in that match, but it was exacerbated by this brawl, and that counts as a loss of earnings because he's on the shelf. I mean, there are lawyers circling. So lawyers are like sharks, and they smell blood in this situation, I am sure. So keep an eye out for it. Now, speaking of the Young Bucks, there have been reports, so there was a report put out there recently about feelers possibly being sent out to those in WWE about when their contracts with AEW do come to an end. We know that AEW exercised the optional year on their contract. The contracts aren't set to expire, I believe, until 2024. But this has been a rumor. We spoke about it the other day. Now, Ryan Frederick of the Wrestling Observer message board noted that current AEW EVPs, the Young Bucks, had sent out feelers within the company to gauge possible interest whenever their contracts are up. When I say the company, of course, I mean WWE. Now, this has been an ongoing rumor among, according to Fightful, and as we said, Sean Ross out once again at Fightful Select. Be sure to check it out. It's their Patreon page. They do excellent work. Now, this has been an ongoing rumor among sources, according to Fightful, that they have spoken to dating back into to August. Now, one source indicated that they've been sworn that the Young Bucks asked to speak to somebody in management, which Fightful are saying they've been unable to confirm. However, one source is saying, yep, they wanted to talk to someone in WWE management, but Fightful have been unable to independently confirm that. However, the rumor that the Young Bucks sent feelers out to WWE has persisted within WWE for several weeks now. Now, sources close to the Young Bucks, according to Fightful, say they haven't been given that indication whatsoever. So sources possibly within WWE or AEW are saying, yeah, they sent feelers out to WWE. However, sources close to the Young Bucks are saying, well, we haven't heard that. And when you hear sources close to the Young Bucks, of course, that can mean anyone. That can mean the Young Bucks themselves. We don't know. Now, that person, by all accounts, would likely be in a good position to relay that information. Wink, wink. But says they aren't sure who the Young Bucks would even reach out to in that regard. I can think of one person. He's not in management in WWE, but I can think of one person that they used to work with very closely in AEW as an EVP that's currently in WWE. So I find that a little bit laughable. Now, when they go, Young Bucks, I don't even know who we'd reach out to in WWE. Who would we even talk to if we wanted to contact someone? Oh, I don't know. Cody Rhodes? You know, the guy you helped found AEW with, you could talk to him. He could put in a good word. AJ Styles, it's not as if you don't have history of him from your time in New Japan as well. There are plenty of people. Kevin Owens. There are plenty of people they could talk to in WWE. I know they're talents, but it's not a big jump from talent to management. So maybe they're saying, well, it comes to, executives, who do we even reach out to? Fair enough, but you can't sit there and say, we don't even know who we'd reach out to in WWE, honestly. Come on. Let's not be completely naive here. Now, it's worth noting that Fightful had heard people who worked in talent relations had outright reached out to AEW talent last month. Of course, that was the story that those within WWE had reached out to certain talent. Chris Jericho tried to intimate that it was him. Of course, Tony Khan and Mega Parek, the chief legal officer of AEW, did send a legal letter to WWE, suggesting, we're aware of what you're doing. Don't contract tamper. This could get very nasty. Now, another source that has worked with higher-ups confirmed that they had heard the rumor but hadn't asked people of influence within WWE because they weren't sure how it would be received. Basically, there's a lot of people in WWE that have heard this rumor about the Bucks reaching out. However, nobody's really talking about it. However, they were there in 2018 and were quick to remind Fightful that the Young Bucks nearly signed with WWE then before helping start All Elite Wrestling. That person believes they wouldn't even need to gauge interest about coming into the company and would likely be taking the temperature on other situations related to possible free agency. Now, Fightful were given no indication prior to AEW All Out that the Young Bucks wanted out of AEW. Since then, talk of that has remained quiet for obvious reasons regardless. They'll be asking more people backstage this coming week at the WWE television taping. So, look, I don't doubt that maybe the Young Bucks haven't spoken to management in WWE, and they've got to be really careful because they're under contract for 2 more years. And this is what I was kind of talking about the other day when it comes to the Young Bucks and them possibly reaching out to WWE. It's not happening anytime soon. They are under contract for nearly 2 more years. I think it's the end of 2024. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So between now and then, just think how much can change in 2 and a bit years. Look how much has changed, not in pro wrestling, but in life in 2.5 years. So maybe right now they're like, if we could go. If it was today, you would probably say, well, if they were a free agent today, they'd probably be gone because they're suspended and the situation with AEW is what it is. And they've seen how well it worked for Cody so far. Well, obviously, it's going to be interesting to see what happens under the Triple H regime in WWE with Cody Rhodes. But they've seen what's happened with him. And I'm sure actually with Triple H, they'd be pushed way, way more. And tag team wrestling still doesn't really matter in WWE, but there's a lot of building they can and possibly want to do in that company. So if it was today, possibly the Young Bucks would go to WWE, but it's not. they're a free agent come the end of 2024. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see when it comes to that. Now, speaking of the Young Bucks, speaking of the Elite, Being the Elite is on hiatus. I wonder why. Now, Being the Elite, of course, is a weekly YouTube series that showcases what it's like being the Elite. It's in the title. The Elite, of course, is Omega and the Young Bucks. They've done, over the years, 322 episodes, which has documented their journey around the world of professional wrestling into their days in AEW as well. Now, usually, the popular show would typically drop on a Monday. However, that did not happen this week. After the backstage brawl that took place between the Elite and CM Punk, Being the Elite has been placed on hiatus until further notice. Now, the announcement appears to be directly linked to the backstage fight following the All Out pay-per-view. Now, again, the Being the Elite episode came out last week, actually after the All Out Brawl. However, it was filmed prior to the All Out Brawl, so it could come out. This would have been the first bit of footage filmed since the Brawl. There's been no footage filmed, not because they're suspended, but probably because, again, they've been advised by AEW, don't say anything. They've probably been advised by their lawyers, don't say anything, and it's best to keep everything quiet and out of the eye. Now, frankly, I suppose they could have done an episode whereby it didn't involve the Elite and it would just had the characters, that usually appear, whether it's, Ryan Nemeth or the Dark Order or whoever. There's lots of people that appear on these episodes, but usually the Bucks and Omega, at least one of them, appear, and they can't at the moment. And you would actually get confirmation that Nick Jackson has a black eye, etc. So they've clearly been advised not to do it. So it's on hiatus until further notice, possibly until they're unsuspended, or possibly, who knows what's going to happen. I don't know when it comes to that. But one thing we do know, Being the Elite is on hiatus until further notice. And what that further notice is, we'll have to wait and see. Now, Sami Guevara says he's got a lot of things to get off his chest in his latest vlog. Sami Guevara has teased spilling the beans on a lot of the controversy engulfing AEW right now. The former 3-time TNT champion revealed last night that he has a lot to say on his vlog, which typically airs every Tuesday night. As of right now, it hasn't dropped just yet. He said, quote, "I've got some shit to say," he wrote on Twitter. "I've kept my mouth shut for 3 years, enough. See you on tomorrow's vlog." Now, this could be a reference to nothing. It could be a reference to the all-out brawl between the Elite and CM Punk. It could be a reference to his incident he had with Eddie Kingston a couple of weeks ago that led to Eddie Kingston being suspended for 2 weeks. I suggest it's probably nothing. It's probably him trying to drum up some talk, some chatter, and someone to actually view his vlog. I would be shocked if in his vlog he decided to shoot, because if he did, he'd get suspended. So I doubt that would be happening. I don't think he's going to pour CM Punk. Of course, if he does, we'll talk about it here, but I think Tony Khan's probably had a word, so I doubt that is going to happen. Finally, let's talk about the ratings for Rampage, and if you're an AEW fan, you'll be like, oh, do we have to? Because it's not good. Rampage continues to see a downward trend in both total viewership and key demographic when it comes to their ratings. Friday's episode, which was this past Friday's episode, was watched by 429,000 average viewers, which is down 12% from the live go-home episode of All Out, and even slightly down from the August 26 episode, which was watched by 431,000 viewers. Now, this is the lowest number since July 29. The key demographic also took a 12% hit. Rampage was watched by 183,000 average viewers in that 18 to 49 demographic. Now, going back a year, Rampage has seen a significant drop. The September 10, 2021 episode had a total viewership number of 670,000 viewers, which is up 46% from this past Friday. The key demographic is also down 47% with a 0.27 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. It's not good for AEW Rampage, but it wasn't a bad show, and it featured matches that were of substance. It had a Ring of Honor World Championship match, which again, Tony Khan has this thing where he gives away World Championship matches on Dynamite that really don't mean all of that much. He had that Tournament of Champions match between Sami Guevara and Darby Allin. Wasn't a bad show, but Rampage, as I mentioned, I feel like a lot of damage has been done. Clearly, a lot of damage has been done over 12 months when it comes to it, because it's taped. People know what's going to happen. It's in a terrible time slot, 10 p.m., and it's just a show that feels, avoidable. If you miss it, you don't miss out on much. You don't be like, stuff doesn't happen on Rampage. So you go, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've got to tune in next week to find out what happens there. It just feels insignificant. And the ratings honestly reflect that. And I know Tony Khan has said recently that people coming back from injury as a way to fix that. Well, a lot of the people that came back from injury, one of them, Kenny Omega, is now no longer on the show for the foreseeable future. So I don't know how they fix that. As I mentioned, my recommendation would be to go live. If you can't go live on a Friday, move it to a Saturday. Move it to a 2-hour show that airs in the usual time slot of 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And make sure stuff that is important happens. I know obviously people would say, wow, logistically and all this kind of stuff, but Tony Khan's got to kind of save that show. I know he can talk about certain numbers that fit the narrative that things are going well for that show, but ultimately they're not. So there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.